Hey everyone, welcome to Tea and Chocolate and Happy New Year. I'm absolutely delighted today to have Carolyn Topperman as my first guest of 2022. And Carolyn is a writer of Canadian and European descent. We're going to be speaking about, this is the topic, it's going to be called Coming and Going. So I hope you stick around to listen to what inspiration Caroline offers today. And if you go to her blog or her Instagram, it's called Style on the Side. I highly recommend it. It's so creative. And Carolyn, this book that you've also written, she's also an author in many things, and she will be giving you a proper introduction of herself. Tell me what you see is this brilliant book that she's published. And along the left side, there's these incredible photographs and images of all the places that she's gone to around the globe. And then on the opposite side is a descriptor of what it is. And then there's a question. And there's a space for you to fill it out, right? And why I think this is absolutely brilliant, Caroline, is because it allows someone to tap into their curiosity, their imagination, discovery of themselves. I can go on and on, right? You can tell me why later, like why you wrote this book. And I just think this is the brilliance of it, right? It really allows us to remember who we are and even to ignite some of our dreams. So thanks for, in my opinion. So thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I was so looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you. Me too. And that's great. I'm going to hire you to do all my intros.
Intros? Okay.
That was great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it's really funny when people ask me where I'm from or where I've been or where I've lived. My first response is always, how much time do you have? Because it's never a simple answer. Because I was born in Sweden. Came to Canada with my parents when I was little. So, I remember standing in front of the judge and him saying, "Welcome to Canada," when we got our official Canadian citizenships. But I was really little when we came over. And from there, my mom was always the one who would move. There's a story that she sold one of our apartments in the basement of the building that it was in to some couple. And from day one, I remember going and looking at real estate listings with her, and any house that had an open house, we were there. And I don't know why, but maybe just the act of doing that and the act of traveling with my parents from a young age made me always want to move and always want to keep moving. And if it's okay, I'll go back a little bit with my grandparents. So
yes.
I actually finished a memoir that I'm currently querying. So if any agents are listening, this is a plug.
Awesome.
Shameless, I know. But so my grandparents, my family's from Poland. And my grandparents on my mother's side, so my maternal grandparents, they were communist Jews, and they left Poland at the beginning of the war for obvious reasons. And they headed east, and they made it all the way to Uzbekistan. So they actually survived the war in Tashkent, Uzbekistan, wow. And then they went up to Moscow, and then they came back to Poland in 1944. And my paternal grandparents, so my dad actually he was born in 1937, so he was born just before the war. And that side of the family was left for Afghanistan, where my grandfather built roads.
Right.
And my grandmother, she was the only woman allowed to trade with the men in the market. And she actually convinced the local officials of the area that they were living in to let the girls wear shorts to gym class because she was a teacher. And then they came back to Poland as well at the end of the war, and both grandfathers were engineers. So it was always about building and creating and doing, more technical than I am, definitely. I'm not the most technical person you've ever spoken to, but they were all about building and growing. And then in 1968, my maternal grandparents basically got kicked out of Poland. So they became political refugees. And my parents at the time, my dad was in Baghdad in Iraq, and my mom was in Paris. And they couldn't come back because she would have been arrested. And he probably wouldn't have been allowed to leave either. This was, they would have taken away their passports, the government. So my mom joined my dad in Iraq, and then they both traveled to Paris together where they lived for a while. And then they moved to Sweden. I was born. And then they came to Canada. So it's like I was traveling, like there was this movement in my family from before I was born, and it never left. And then my grandparents, on my maternal grandparents, actually settled in Germany. So every other summer we would go visit my grandparents. We'd get in a car. We never had a lot of money, so it was always done a little bit DIY, I guess. And I like to say, actually, my mom was the first Airbnb-er, because we would land in a city and she would call up a local real estate agent and she'd say, hey, I'm looking to rent something for the next month or however long we were going to be there. And wherever we'd go, we'd spend a day. I'm not even kidding you. Like we did this in Italy. We did this in Spain. I remember doing this. Like everywhere we go, she'd call and she'd say, hey, can I, like, what do you have available? And we would go visit, we'd go house hunting basically for like the first day or two that we'd be there. We'd go house hunting, we'd pick a house and we'd move in for a week, for like however many weeks we were going to be there. So we always lived with the locals, and we never stayed in hotels. And that's how we could afford to be somewhere for a month, because it was somebody who obviously had their house available for rent and no one had. And we were like, we'll take it off your hands for the next month. And so I grew up with that. And everywhere we go, we'd drive. And my mom actually spoke like 7 or 8 languages. And she was one of these people, you could drop her into a country, any random country in the world. And after about 2 days, she'd be like somewhat fluent in the language. She just picked them up. So it was just this talent
Really?
she had.
That's fascinating.
So yeah, it was really cool. So she could do so it was just that. It was like land somewhere and we're locals. It's fine. We shop with the locals, eat with the locals, all of that.
Mm.
And I think because of that, that sort of somehow transferred onto me. And, my life is nowhere near as crazy as theirs. I've never fled Nazis and like, nothing like that. But I think that we tried to do a little bit of that too. Like that's how I grew up a little bit. So in, I don't know, 2013, I got tired of living, maybe 2010, I got tired of living in Vancouver. It was a hard city to live in. I had gone there with my husband for work, from Toronto, and I got sick of it. It's a good city. I don't, please no like hate
Okay.
me from Vancouver. It's a good city, but I got tired. It's a hard city to live in. I owned a Pilates studio there.
Yeah.
I had trained some celebrities, NHL players, people like that, and then I shut it down. Went back to my roots writing. I worked in real estate too. I don't know if it's possible to live in Vancouver and not have something to do with real estate. And then I just decided one day that my husband is also Polish, so we got our Polish passports because we had the right to get them.
Yeah.
It took about 1.5 years, and then we just sold everything and moved to Poland for 4.5 years.
But by the way, just backtrack. Why was it hard to live in Vancouver? Is this economically or at the soul level that we were talking about?
Yes and yes.
Yes and yes.
So
okay.
Economically, for sure, because it's just so expensive.
Yeah.
Everything is more. For me, part of it was that when I had my Pilates studio, and for a while I worked as a personal trainer, and then I had my Pilates studio. Part of the thing, and this was so bizarre to me, I remember going into the grocery store and running into a client who looked in my basket to see what I was getting. And so it became this weird paranoia of like, I can't ever eat ice cream or something.
All right.
And because I felt like I was being judged all the time. And
Hilarious.
this is a true story, and this is awful. I went with a bunch of friends to a restaurant, and we were just looking through the hors d'oeuvres, and we were thinking of just little munchies to eat. The waiter says, remember ladies, nothing tastes as good as skinny feels. So we promptly ordered 4 waters, and that was it. And this was in Yale Town, which I get it, in Yale Town, the land of the beautiful people, but it was horrible, right? It was just not a good feeling. So it was partly that. I have to say, like, that was starting to wear on me a little bit, this whole constant pressure to go run the seawall first thing in the morning and not to eat anything. And, I don't know, that's a hard life. And partially that, and then partially just, I felt like Vancouver, just geographically, it's beautiful, but it is a little bit isolated. So I remember we would drive the 3 hours down to Seattle to go see dance performances, because nobody would come up to Vancouver, or you'd get the second company, a touring company of a bigger company,
Right.
never as good. So dance is what pushed that for me, theater and dance, because that was another part of my life. And I miss that idea of like 1,000 little art galleries, and that you get even in Poland, in Warsaw, which is, when you look at European cities, it's not like one of the sexy ones. It's not Paris or London or even Prague. It's, people don't really get it, but I could still, when I got there, my husband and I just decided to go on a trip there because he hadn't been back since he left when he was a kid. And I hadn't been back. My first and only time there was in 1995. And so this was like 2011. And we went, and it was just there was so much excitement. This is actually when things were politically pretty good there. Not right now, but there was so many little businesses, and you'd walk down the street and there's like one gallery after another, and I could go see a dance performance for $50 and get a really good seat too, which was a bonus. And actually, hilariously, where we were staying, we're walking by this restaurant and we keep seeing Canadian, in Polish, it was Kanadyjskie gofry, which is Canadian waffles. And we were like, what are Canadian waffles, right? Like, I have no clue. And it turned out this girl who was a super hipster girl, dreads, all of it, she had lived in or visited Vancouver, and she had been on Main Street. There was a waffle place on Main Street where they made waffles, but they put the ingredients in the batter instead of on top. And so she decided that this was representative of all Canadian waffles.
Oh my God.
That was great. And the other thing too is Polish waffles are always rectangular, but these were round. So she found a round waffle maker, brought it over, imported it, called this place Canadian Waffles, and she was selling them. And there's but she was one out of hundreds of these tiny hole in the wall places that had these great ideas that were just selling these foods. And there's so much excitement around all of that. And so that's why, and then we got back to Vancouver and I was like, see, that's what's missing here. That kind of innovation. Sure, there's a lot of tech innovation, and that's wonderful. And, my husband's in the tech industry, so that's great. But that arts way of thinking, that artsy way of thinking, that kind of, I'm gonna try something crazy just because.
I totally respect what you're saying. I resonate. I mean, I was born and raised here, and I've also lived in Europe and even on one of the islands. And I totally appreciate, it's about life. It's about how people value their lives. So tell me about the decision when you decided, okay, we're going to Poland. Tell me all that. Tell me about that. The coming and the going. Let's go.
So it took about 1.5 years actually to do. I like to pretend it was really spontaneous. It wasn't. The paperwork took a long time. I had a lot of paperwork to do.
Okay.
And I had to actually fill out places where my family lived before they left.
Oh, wow.
And why they left. It was, luckily my dad somehow remembered everybody's addresses, so he was able to help me with it.
Right.
And then I had to do like a biography of everybody who had left, where they were living and what they had done. So it was
wow.
It was like quite a thick manuscript that was a book in itself to do. So I did that. But we both got our passports, and then the rest was easy. We sold most of the big ticket items, packed a bunch of things in storage, and just went. It was, I contacted several real estate agents before we went. Everybody, and I was like, look, I just need to be in the middle of the city. I don't need anything super fancy, but I need to be living in a place where I walk outside and about 20 feet down the road is a coffee shop or a restaurant and some stores and life. And when it gets in February, when it gets dark at like noon, I don't know, 4 p.m.
Right.
And it's cold and it's awful and everybody just wants to be somewhere warm, I need life. So don't put me on some quiet street in the, I don't need to be on the busiest street. But, and actually, as it turned out, we were overlooking a park, and right behind us was the big main intersection. So
Okay.
we had the best of both worlds. And yeah, we had some savings. We took what we sold. Everything else got packed away. We packed 11 boxes that went on a boat across the ocean, and we showed up. And yeah, and that was it. And then we were like, we'll figure it out when we get there.
Awesome. And what was the feeling like?
It was weird. So we arrived November 14th, and November 11th is their Independence Day. And it's not like our Canada Day or US Independence Day where there's flags and fireworks and things. There are riots. There are full on riots.
Riot.
I have video footage. It is awful and horrifying and terrible, because it's also, so in the morning you'll get the parades and the celebrations, and in the afternoon the nationalists come out. And actually on that day, big multinational companies do tell their people who are not white to stay home.
Is that right?
Poland has a very strong undercurrent, like where places like Germany, anything Nazi related in Germany, for example, is banned, right? Poland doesn't have that. So by the time we were leaving, it was escalating. And I mean, so much so that I think it's New York Times even was reporting on it.
What year was this?
So, this is 2013.
2013.
This is not that long ago.
Right. Okay.
And there used to be this one square, which is like one of my favorite spots in Warsaw, that had this rainbow in the middle of the square, just a artistic rainbow. And every year, the joke became that it's burn down the rainbow day, because people would burn down that rainbow. I don't even think they have it up anymore. And so it was bad. There'd be flares going off. There'd be huge crowds marching. There'd be police in full riot gear. And we came right in the aftermath of that. So the city still had that weight of it, because the city's just cleaning up after what it just went through. But for us, it was still super exciting. There was like the two different sides of it, because for us, it was still great. And Poland, or Warsaw, has this love affair with the US, which is weird, but also with Paris. So right on the main street, and we were on near a very touristy area, but right down there, it was cool. There were like 4 amazing Parisian restaurant bakeries within 2 minutes walking distance for us. So every day we'd visit little Paris every day. And one of the nice things about Europe is that they allow dogs to come into these places too. So we'd have our little Cairn Terrier, and she would go in, and our favorite place, Vincent's, the guy's actually from France, but he knows Canada really well. So when we walked in and he found out we're from Canada, first words out of his mouth, "Ah, la poutine." And from then on, every time we'd come in, if he was around, he'd like sit down on the floor, grab a fresh baguette or a croissant, and feed our dog, like hand feed our dog. So that part was amazing. And there was that moment of everything is possible, and we can do anything is possible, everything is possible. And we just wanted to work and start businesses and do things.
Right. That's really cool. So like during that time, just out of curiosity, were you moving about within Europe as well?
So we were there for 4.5 years, and we moved to 3 different apartments in 4.5 years. So we kept up that trend.
Yeah.
And we traveled a lot. So we didn't live in other places, but we did travel a lot.
Right.
So we'd go, and towards the end, my husband actually wound up getting a job with a big multinational. So we had a lot of trips to Germany, because that's where part of his team was. But we were in, so we went, we did like Germany a bunch. That's where a lot of my family lives now. And we did France, obviously, because I can't be there without being in Paris. And the UK, and we actually, just before we left, we did a really cool trip by train through part of Italy, which was a lot of fun.
Mhm.
So we just we like hopped on the train, went down, it went through Prague or through the Czech Republic. I don't think we hit Prague, but we did go to Prague on a different trip because it was so easy. You know, you just hop on a plane and you're there an hour later, and it's like $50.
Mhm.
A friend of mine, actually, before I left, she's Lithuanian, and she decided to take me to Lithuania, to Vilnius, to see where she's from,
Mhm.
which was amazing. And anybody
Really?
who's in the arts and anybody who likes the arts,
Yes. Yes.
Vilnius is on your list as of right now.
Lithuania?
Yeah, it's bizarre. It's not what I would have thought of ever, but it really is, because there's some amazing things. It's like very earthy, grassroots still. You know, it's not
Oh,
like the
love that.
fancy like Paris, but
Yeah.
it's so, it just feels so right. And there's this wall in Vilnius that's like, I think it's a kilometer, and it started off as a tribute to all Lithuanian writers,
Mhm.
and people just put up plaques on it, and now it's any writer. I think they've kind of, that's been a little bit diluted, but you just walk down it, it's just all tribute to writers, so it's phenomenal.
Oh.
Yeah.
So I think that your early beginnings, your very, very early beginnings before you came into the world, I think it's really interesting how, um, you know, they say that our grandparents or our great, 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 et cetera, they're within us. And it's really interesting how your life has manifested in a similar way. And how do you, when you think about that, like, how has that shaped you as a writer or as a
Because
human being, both?
um because I grew up hearing stories. I was always the kid who liked listening to stories, and
Right,
everybody told stories, and it
right.
was
Love
always
that.
that. I didn't know my dad's parents. They disowned him. So, but my dad filled that in. Yeah, he never came back to Poland, and they disowned him for it. But my dad filled that in. Like,
Okay.
he told stories of that. Even now, if get my dad talking, and he doesn't stop, and he's 84, and he'll tell you about his like childhood in Afghanistan. And so it was always that. It was always,
Wow.
we were always encouraged to discover and learn and see and try. And the other grandparents, interestingly enough, so the other side, they wouldn't talk about the war at all. I never heard them talk about the war. When I
Okay.
started being curious about it, started reading, like, I remember I was reading Sally J. Friedman as Herself. It's a Judy Blume book. And, so I was like, what, 13, 12, something. And my grandmother was furious that I was reading it. My mother was like, it's okay, let her discover it. And
Oh,
so there were those kinds of secrets, those things that they wouldn't talk about. But my grandfather, he was my best friend for a while. My grandmother too. My grandfather and I would go hiking together, and he was super tall, and I was like this little kid running behind him. 4 steps for every one of his. But in the mountains, he would take me when we were in Switzerland once, and I loved going in the mountains with him on his hikes. And
wow.
I remember once stopping by this little house that looked like it was right out of Heidi or something, and there's this big ram that came up to us, and he like grabbed its horn and shook it, and little details like that. It was just, there was so much of that. Like, they
Mhm.
never lost that, so they managed to pass that down to us. Um,
Well,
so
one of the
yeah.
things that I notice in your writing is the small things that are so significant to you. Like, it's really in the detail. It seems like when you wake up in the morning, you're about to either tell a story or look for a story.
Yeah, I mean, because it is that we never, I remember this was years ago, and I remember my cousin, my cousins, they had more money than us. My uncle had a lot more money, so when they traveled, they did like expensive ski vacations. They stayed in hotels. We never did that. It was always at that grassroots level with my family, and I remember my cousins, like, I must have been about 13 or something, and my cousin said to me, I like staying in the 4-star hotels better than the 5-star, because the 5-star, they're not really trying anymore. And the 4-star hotels are trying. Before that, I had probably stayed in a roadside motel when we were driving from Toronto to like Prince Edward Island. You know, like we
Right.
didn't stay in hotels. I didn't even know what he was
Wow.
talking about, let alone a 5-star hotel.
Right.
And so I think it's because of that. So because my parents were really good at teaching us to find the excitement, the fun, the beauty in those little things. We
Yes.
had we would do, in Europe, we would do road trips with my grandparents. So we'd all pile everything into the car. And my grandmother had this little troll doll, which I actually have now. And the troll would give out candy. So, and there are these like lemon drops that are coated with powdered sugar that just, they bring back so many memories now. And every now and then we'd be like, oh, I need a candy. So the troll would like pass them out in the car. And so, and we, you know, we'd be traveling for hours and hours across Europe in this car. But that was fun. I don't ever remember hating it or being bored.
Hmm. That's exciting. I think that's just beautiful. So I've got other questions for you, but could you just say, give some sort of insight to people who just feel like, the place that they're in, that they would consider their home right now, and going somewhere where they've never been before. What do you think that takes to do that? What kind of advice would you give?
I mean, it can be scary, like
Yeah.
absolutely. And I know I've wound up places where I don't speak the language and it's weird and I don't get it. And I'm like, but
Yeah.
I think the idea is just to go in and not think you know better. Just give
Mhm.
yourself over to it, because,
Oh, great.
right? That's the
Yeah.
thing.
Awesome.
I find that,
Yeah.
and don't pretend that you're like, I find that happens a lot. You know, you go in and you're like the tourist, so you bring your own things with you. Don't. It's okay. You know, go to a restaurant, get the waiter to recommend something.
Mm.
Go somewhere, and
Awesome.
don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be
Yeah.
afraid to open yourself up to people. Like
Mhm.
really, they're probably going to be happy to help you and happy to chat with you, and it'll be fine. You know, when we were in Berlin the last time with my husband, we went there, and there's a lot of people who don't speak any English, right? They're like, you're on our land, you're going to speak German. You know,
Yeah.
I know like 5 words in German. They don't all work very well. And
Yeah.
so, but it was that moment of just, I smile and just let them, and you know, like take yourself down a notch, I guess is what it
Yeah.
would be.
Yeah.
Don't be too hyper specific about everything. Like, it's okay, nothing's gonna happen.
Right.
I actually had a funny thing in like, I speak Polish fluently, but I got to Poland, and you know, I don't know the slang, I don't know all the words, there's a lot I'm missing.
Hmm.
And it was, there were times where it was awful, because people would literally talk to me and treat, like they would dissect every single thing I said. And some people, you know, they would talk about my accent. I'm like, yeah, I have an accent because I never lived here, sorry. And it would get really unpleasant. Like I kind of got the, I kind of got that when immigrants come and they're afraid to speak English here. And like, I understood that, because there's 1 or 2 stores, and I will admit it now, I never once ordered anything in there because I was so afraid of the ladies, because they were so harsh. But
Oh,
I finally figured out one
yeah.
thing, to what I would say is,
Yeah.
I would give my biggest smile and I would say, I'm sorry, I haven't learned that word yet.
Oh, brilliant.
And people would just, you could see all
Oh,
those walls and things would drop, and they'd laugh at me, and I'd be like, yeah, okay. And then they would help me.
yeah. That takes someone who's, you
It took
know,
about 3 years, but
but still, it's smart. So, the point that you were making earlier about being so hyper specific when we arrive somewhere, and this is the way that, we think that we should be. What does that tell you about who we are, or who maybe some of us who do that?
I mean, and you know, I do to an extent. Like, of
Yeah,
course, we
it's
bring
natural.
everything. You know, I
Yeah.
don't want to say, you know, I'm not necessarily ideal either. But I think what happens is that it's that, like, so one of the things that's really cool about living in Toronto, where I am now, and I
Mhm.
mean, I grew up just like suburbs of Toronto, but
Yeah.
is the multiculturalism, right? So you can go and you can go and be in like a different little country in one day. You can do like 5 countries easily because there's all these areas. And I think what it is that we just don't spend enough time really getting to know other cultures in terms of food, language, and just cultural, like everyday
Right.
behaviors.
Right.
My parents, because they lived in so many places, they knew how to embrace things very quickly. So I remember, this is an example. My dad taught me how to figure out if a handmade Persian rug is a really good quality, and you just count the back. You flip it over and you count the amount of knots in the back. But now I can go into a store that sells rugs, flip it over, and I kind of know what I'm looking for as well. So it's like I've taken the time to appreciate your culture and your art in this specific case. And so that person right away it just warms up to me a little bit, because I'm not walking in completely blind to what they do. And I think that that's what happens is too often we sit in our little communities or our little worlds, and we don't explore enough, learn enough, read enough, try enough.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
and then that causes an immediate barrier.
Yes.
So I don't need to walk into your country and speak badly in your language, and but a word here or there to try or to listen. I think that's big. Not to like turn my nose up at your food right away. Just try it. It's fine. Like if you don't like it, order something else. That kind of thing.
Right.
We were in Naples. I don't speak Italian, but there were things here and there, and I really wanted like fresh seafood, and they loved it. And I wound up, super broken Italian, like 1 or 2 words, because this waitress is somewhat broken English, but a lot better than my Italian.
Yeah.
And at the end, she's like, "Hey, if you want a job, we'd love to hire you."
Oh my God.
Right?
Fantastic.
Because I was open to trying it. I didn't, even if something does like gross me out, I try not to. You won't know.
Yeah.
So it's that. It's just not like put down your own walls, I guess.
Yeah. As a side note, our family is from in the Naples area.
I love Naples. I love Naples.
I've never been to Naples proper, and I'm dying to go there. And everyone says it's really what's the word that I want? Oh my God, dangerous. But I've heard the most amazing things.
Oh, please. It's not dangerous. Like, it's come on. Like, okay, maybe like, maybe some specific scenario. I know it is a lot more like, we'll call it raw. And I know that it was, but the people are working on cleaning that kind of stuff up. It's not anything. Naples for me has, if I can ever afford it one day, I'm getting in a little pieta in Naples. Naples has this heat to it, like the people, the streets. There's this like heat emanating from the city.
Yep.
And I absolutely loved it. Like I got there and I was like, oh yeah, I'm home. Like this just feels right.
Right.
And it's just this like, it's like they have that, I have it here somewhere. They have that little symbol for Naples. It's like that little horn pepper thing for luck. Yeah. So I have one and I travel with it.
Oh my God.
But that's Naples, this little red, the heat, right? Like whether it's a horn or a pepper, I think it's interchangeable, the image in this case. And it's the people are like that, but they're super warm and friendly. The other thing that I love about Naples are those like super crazy narrow streets that you have, and it's just like all vendors down the sides. That's the more touristy part, but oh yeah, it's so good. I loved it.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Now, one of the key things that I heard you say just a few minutes ago was the topic of culture. And you know what? That's the one thing I think today is missing in the discussion around identity politics. Because we focus so much on whatever your sort of values and ideologies are. It's like, I think people are kind of getting a bit exhausted about it, but everyone's got to be themselves in this world, right? And the one thing I really feel is that diversity of thought is missing, and the fact that there's a lot of cultural things that we're missing out on because we're so focused on our skin color, our pronoun, our gender. And I'm thinking, where do you see that? Like, where do you, I don't know. I want us to talk more about someone's culture and the things that you shared about, like your family. Those are the things that matter.
Yeah, I mean, I agree 100%. And, there's actually an article that recently came out in the National Post. It was a reporter from the CBC who had quit, who had been there for a while, and she quit um, because
Oh,
of that, exactly, because
she
the
went to
CBC,
Substack.
yeah,
Yeah, I can't
it's a
remember
fan,
her name, but
yeah.
yes. Oh my God.
And I followed her on Substack just out of pure
Yeah,
solidarity, because
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Awesome.
But that's the thing. That's that's the thing with I think that that's missing. That's sort of partially what I'm talking about. And it's so easy to lump people together, and it's so easy to do that. But one of the things that you think, like, I'll talk about Europe because this is what I know.
Sure.
Europe has 44 different countries, I think, at least. Everybody there speaks a different language. It's a different culture. It's a different foods. Sometimes you go to the same country and they have different national holidays, like the North and the South, right? And I think that that's what we forget. And we start to lump people into these big, giant groups and not realize that it's completely different. And I have a friend, she's Chinese, and she's married to, her husband's Jewish. And they were over at our house when we were still allowed to have people over. And we were talking about Christmas, for example. So my family, I grew up celebrating Christmas and Hanukkah because I
Yeah.
had both sides.
Right.
Both sides did it.
Yeah.
But she was saying how, she's like, yeah, Christmas, whatever. Like, she's like, I don't really care. We can celebrate Hanukkah. The kids like it better anyway. The food's better. Like, I don't want to make turkey for Christmas. And I was like, what are you talking about? Never had turkey for Christmas. Don't even understand turkey for Christmas. What's that all about? Why? Because in Poland, it's Polish Catholics, and they do Christmas Eve. We don't do Christmas Day.
Mm-hmm.
And for Christmas Eve, you do 12 vegetarian with fish, but like vegetarian meals. There's no turkey. You can't find turkey. I mean, you can't really find turkey, and it's not a food that they really eat there very much.
Mm-hmm.
So we never had turkey. Literally never had turkey for Christmas.
Yeah.
And so that's part of it. We were looking at that, and I was like, okay, so you just lumped me in with all these other people, but we've never done that because that wasn't part of our culture. And I think it's that assuming everybody's the same, and assuming that everybody has the same traditions. And
yeah.
I actually hate the word tradition, because tradition to me is a word that it's so locked in that you can't change it. And too many people go, oh, well, it's tradition.
That's a great point.
And I hate that, because, and I have this fight with some family members, but to me, traditions need to be made. They need to be changed. They need to adapt. They need to move. They need to be open, and they can't be, oh, because we've always done it this way. That's when the world can't move forward.
Yeah.
And so I think that's it. I have my dad, who, if you look at my dad, he's 100% Polish, 100% white, but he's been mistaken for Egyptian before, because of his features.
Right.
So it's, you can't just tell by looking at someone, and you can't just take it like that. And because my parents lived in Iraq, my dad lived in Afghanistan. Most of my dad's memories when he talks about him as a kid are from Afghanistan.
I know, I was reading that. That's fascinating.
And my grandfather wrote a Polish Farsi dictionary for his family, which I have, where it's probably not a complete dictionary, but all the words they needed and they used, he wrote that. Mm-hmm. My dad's parents, my dad's grandfather was part of E-Cafe, which is the economic something, and I cannot remember it right now, but it's like the precursor to the United Nations. And so he was in their transportation. So my family on that side, my dad talks about traveling through Vietnam. He talks about traveling through India. He talks about traveling through like the Far East, all of that, because that's, his father did work there. That's where they were. That's where they lived. And they didn't live like in the whole colonial, I mean, a little bit probably, but not in the full way of like, oh, we have all these servants and we're like up here. They like ate and dined with people, with the
Oh,
locals. They lived with the locals. They,
yeah.
again, it wasn't they didn't come in there with hordes of money to change people. They came there to work with the people. Um, so I think it's, I think that that's a big part of it, is just realizing that like people are different. They have different backgrounds. Um, and whatever your skin color is, we have different backgrounds. It's like,
Yeah.
and it's okay. And we should,
Yeah.
it should be that way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's
I'm
my take
wondering,
on it.
like as a globe, like when you, I don't know, think about, I don't know, picking up and going on your next adventure, um, what that's going to look like.
Yeah. Post COVID, I don't know. But there's so many places I want to go and see and try and do.
Mhm.
I'd love to go to Sweden. I was born there.
Yeah.
I have hilariously have military issue dog tags that everybody got at some point in case Russia ever decided to put in a nuclear attack against Sweden. It gives me a place in a bomb shelter of all things.
Okay.
Ridiculous, but it's really funny. But I don't remember it. I've never been. So even though my family really isn't from there, I still feel this kind of funny connection to there. And then of
Yeah.
course there's like the whole non-Europe part of the world that I also want to visit and see.
Yeah.
Um,
Tell me something specific that sort of helps you become, that helps you write.
so this kind of leads into the book and why I wrote it.
I was just, okay, that was my
Yeah,
next thing.
like
Okay,
that's like the perfect segue. So I'll just go
perfect.
there if
Okay.
that's okay. So I have a degree in film and screenwriting,
Yeah.
and and I when we came back to Canada, so we left Poland. It was a very quick turnaround. Um, my husband just got pulled in for a job, same company, got pulled in. We went up to Waterloo. We arrived March 1st, which is never a good time to arrive in in this part of the country because it is cold and it is awful and it is dark. And our nearest family was probably an hour and a half away, and I didn't know anybody there. And I'm used to kind of hitting the ground running, no problem. Put me down somewhere. I will figure it out. It's fine. But this just hit hard because I was really grieving that loss. We had made all these great friends. We just left them. Now we were coming to a place where we didn't know anybody and a place where I really didn't want to be. And we landed at like 8 p.m., 9 p.m. or something. We had to go through customs. We had to like declare all the items that would be arriving, I don't know, 3 weeks later by boat. And by the time we got there, it was past 11 and we were hungry. And all we could say is my plug for Uber, but thank you, Uber Eats, because we were able to order pizza at like 11:30 at night because we were starving. And the next day, I think we had an ice storm. So that was fun. That was a whole
Okay.
lot of fun.
Okay.
And we had 2 or 3 days of intense jet lag. And then he went to work and I was by myself in this place and, great, I have to figure it out again. But at the same time, I was writing and thinking and trying to do things. And it's probably I honestly spent probably my first month crying like every day
Mm,
because I just really hated it. I did not want to be there.
right.
I hated where I was. And one day I was just sitting and staring at an empty computer page and thinking, oh, I'm supposed to be a writer. I'm supposed to be writing and I can't write. And then it dawned on me that take 3 steps back. You have a degree in film. You've done theater. I performed on stage. I realized at that moment that I was a visual writer and a
Mm,
visual person,
yeah.
and that this thing of me staring at a blank page or looking at which for the record, I do think are great. Like writing prompts are great, but when I'm not in the mood for them, forget it. I can't write. Like, why are you giving me a writing prompt? I don't care. And so what I did is I I went back to an exercise that we learned in film school, and I just went to my phone, and I remember it was, we were sitting somewhere, it was films, like it was one of our classes, and they were like, just write, just, it doesn't matter, just put words on paper, and it doesn't matter if you're writing the same word over and over again. So I did them one better, and I wrote what I saw in a picture, and it was the first picture I have. I partially, I just really wanted a Polaroid camera too, so I made my husband get me one. But I had a Polaroid that I took, and I just started writing what I saw on the picture. And it was this man, and he was crossing Queen Street, and it was in front of a 501 streetcar, and I described the building. And before I knew it, this little story was emerging from what I was writing. And I was like, okay, wait, this, like, now that, like, I can do this. I can work with this.
Yeah.
And then what I did is, there's actually a picture in the book of a piano on it's standing kind of in a river. It's winter. And that's in Vilnius, just so you know, that's like right there in the hub of their arts community. And I was like, okay, well, what would it feel like if I walked into this picture? Like, I'm pulling up film things now, because when you write a script, you don't write all the technical camera work. You have to write it in such a way that the director and the director of photography can see what you're trying to say. So you don't write extreme long shot, you just describe what it looks like. And so I thought, okay, wait a second. So what happens if I walk into this photograph and using all of my senses describe what I'm seeing? So it's cold, I'm trying not to slip, so my muscles are tensing. You know, I can smell the water, I can hear its rush, I can hear that bird chirping, you know, half a mile away. And I just started writing that down, and everything started coming to life on the page. And then I just started using that for everything. So whether I'm writing an essay or a blog post, I'm doing that. And I realized, so on my blog, because I have that big background in fitness as well, I write a lot of exercises. But how do I write them? I literally do the exercise, and I go, okay, this is where I'm feeling the muscles working, and that's what I write about, so that hopefully you as the reader can do the exercise and go, oh, okay, it's precise enough, it's in the details, right? It's precise enough that I can now follow along, and it doesn't feel abstract. And so that's how I approach it. So with the memoir that I wrote with, it was the same kind of thing. Like, I'd sit down, I'd close my eyes, literally, and I just remember myself being somewhere, and I just remember as best as I could, I'd remember everything around me, how it felt to be there, and then I just write that down.
And that memoir is still forthcoming, right?
Yes, I'm currently querying to agents. So
wow, I'll pick that up. That sounds amazing. I love memoirs.
Yeah, me too, actually. I do enjoy reading.
You must be really grateful for your family.
Yeah, they've been good.
Well,
it's funny because most of my family has passed away. So right now, there's just a very small group of us. My dad, and like during COVID, 3 people died, which was, and not from COVID either. But it's been like a tough couple of years. But right now, it's just my dad and my uncle, who I'm not very close with, who lives in Poland. And
where's your mother?
My mother passed away in 95. Yeah.
Oh
so
my God.
A lot of this actually started, this memoir, these ideas, all of this started floating around in 95 after she died. And I remember I'd walk with my dad in the morning, and I'd interview him, and I'd just get stories on tape. And, you know, it died for a long time, and it came back, and all of that. And I had to re-record him for things because, you know.
It's funny because I was going to ask you about your mom. I was going to really, I had it in the back of my mind to acknowledge your mom, because it seemed like she had, I know both your parents did, but a real influence in your life and the way that she lived, right?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, she was an artist.
Right.
She was, she studied painting in Paris at the École des Beaux-Arts. And so she was a painter at heart.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they moved, she did window, like the fashion window dressings, and
Yeah.
then like
Oh, yeah.
she did that. She did some
Awesome.
courses in that.
Yeah.
And she did like interior design. In Ontario, when you drive towards the airport on the highway, they do it so that they have a picture of a plane, and the plane tilts the way you're supposed to go, and that's her design, actually. So
Oh,
she did a lot of
wow.
graphic design. But and then the one thing she did that was amazing is, after we got her, and it's a little bit sad, but it's a long time ago, so it's okay to talk about.
Yeah.
When we got all her things from her work, she had, like, up until the last moment, she was taking courses. So whether it was going to she used to go to this local Italian restaurant to learn Italian, and I think they spent more time eating bread than learning Italian, but so she was doing that, or she was taking courses in graphic design or computers or language, or anything she could take a course in, she was taking a course in. That woman had more diplomas than I've ever seen anybody have, ever, I think. So that was one of the things. She also wrote early on. I'm still trying to actually find it, but she wrote for the CBC. She would write record radio
Okay.
programs for the
Yeah.
CBC that would
Yeah.
actually get broadcast in Poland, which was really
Wow.
interesting. Yeah, it was
Wow.
like part of their language part.
Yeah.
And just things like that. She always did things like that. And I actually found 4 or 5 pages of something she wrote that I worked into the
memoir.
Yeah.
Oh,
So yeah, she was always
awesome.
doing things like that.
Right. Right. That's incredible. So, before we head off, I'd like to ask you why you called your Insta page Style on the Side.
Oh, that's funny. That took a long time. So I actually, it's originally from the blog, but
Okay.
my original blog when I first started. So this was Vancouver, and I had been working for a real estate developer, and it was 2009, so things were not going well in the world. So there wasn't really any more work.
Oh, yeah.
So I kind of wanted to go back into writing, and I took a course in blogging and social media and all of that, and I got inspired to go back into it. So I started a blog, and the blog was actually called The Girl in the Yellow Dress. And it was based on a commercial for one of our big telecoms of this girl wearing a yellow dress, and she was like all over town. She was writing in the subway, she was writing in a cafe, she had her little laptop, she was all over, and it ends with her sitting on the hood of a car, the sun's going down, and she's like on her laptop or something. And I thought, oh, I want to be the girl in the yellow dress. I want to be that. So it was the girl in the yellow dress. And the problem was, this is the stupidest thing, funniest thing, it's too long. It doesn't work for Twitter. It didn't work for Instagram. It was just too long. And I couldn't get any other combination out of it. But I knew that because I actually did work in the beauty industry, and I did work in fitness, and I worked in all these things. And I figured that style, yeah, it's clothing, but style is also just style. It doesn't have to necessarily be fashion. It can be so many different things.
Yeah.
And I thought that it would be cool for it to be style. It was just like days and weeks of brainstorming and crying and thinking, and it was going to be stories on the side. But I thought that was a little, at the time, it just wasn't really what I was doing and working on. And I had been writing for a big London-based fashion like online fashion magazine and things. And then I was writing for Huffington Post. I was writing all these different things. And then one day it just came to me, and then I just left it. So it just stayed in, because it worked on Twitter, it worked on my blog, it worked on Instagram, it worked across the board. So I stayed with it.
Yeah, I love it.
Thank
You I also read you say that the importance in how you live is really important. And if you can speak on that a little bit, and then finally, what home means to you.
Good question. So how you live. So for me,
You
You
want
know,
to
I
be
move
in
a lot.
Naples.
I move a lot. So, you
You
know, I've been back in Canada since 2018, and this is our third place. So,
did you just say you move a lot?
yeah, we move a lot, like
Okay, got
homes,
ya. Yeah,
buy and sell and move and rent and
you're
all
out.
that.
Cool.
So, we try to keep it minimal. Now I'm like really excited because finally, like we've been in Canada for 4 years. So I had sold a lot of books before we left. And in Poland, most of the books I had were on my iPad. So now I've just gone a little in crazy buying books, which is maybe it's going to make this whole process a little harder. But my husband and I have this thing about if we're going to bring something into the house, it has to be something we really want. Um,
Right. Yeah.
so everything I have, I love. It's funny, but everything I have, I really love.
It's important though, because I hear a lot of, call them spiritual teachers or wellness coaches or whatever. They say that a lot.
And that's what it is. And I
Yeah.
probably use different words than they do about it. But
Yeah.
when I look at it,
Yeah.
everything means something. And the other funny thing is, even with furniture, I know where I got everything. It's not, and nothing is random in that way. And so I think that that's how we like to live. And it's that, and also being open to seeing and trying new things. You know, my husband and I have been together for like over 20 years. And the one word we
Wow.
both freak out about is
Uh-huh.
commitment. We hate the word commitment.
Oh, you both hate the word commitment.
Yeah,
Oh, the
which is
irony.
really funny. And the other part of it is, you know, people will always ask us like, "Oh, so is this it? Is this forever?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. That's a really scary word for me." And we both get a little like heart palpitations when we hear somebody ask us that. "Oh, so this is it. This is it." No, nothing is it. And so that's how we like to live. It's that being open and open to trying new things and doing new things. And being open to pivoting, I guess, is part of it.
Very cool.
Yeah. And the answer to your second question is hilarious because it's like literally how the book ends. I don't know. Home is sort of where I am.
Yeah.
Home is where I am right now, and that's how I like to look at it because I
Yeah.
don't know where it'll be. And you know, I talk about like all the positives, and I love it, and I wouldn't trade this for anything because, but at the same time, there's a downside to all the moving, is that you don't put down the roots in the same way that someone who's lived somewhere for, you know, even 10 years. You don't put down, you just don't have that
Yeah.
um, same relationship to where you are. So, which can be hard for, and I know for a lot of people, that's precisely why they don't move a lot because of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's, for me, home is where I am.
Wonderful. Well, thank you.
Thank you. This is a
Yeah,
lot of
thank
fun.
you. It's been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your time today and all your insights. I've really enjoyed it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And I'm just going to show up this little book. Tell me what you see. I think this is a great gift idea for anybody that you know that's kind of even stuck in their life or something, or who's a writer or who's a creative in some way. And even ones who don't feel that they're creatives, you know, the way we think that we define each other. I think this is just a really great gift idea. And I'm looking forward to your memoir. And I wish you well in all the things that are forthcoming for you and your husband, who you're committed to. Okay. Okay, Caroline, thanks so much and take care of yourself. Thanks everybody for joining me on Tea and Chocolate, and a happy new year. And I wish you so much goodness for this year to come. All right, take care.